It was a humid morning in the small town of Uttar Pradesh, the kind that clung to your skin and made the roads shimmer in the midday sun. Mansi Pandey, just 19, tied her hair back in a neat braid, slipped into her simple kurti, and told her mother she was going out to visit a friend. Nothing unusual. She was a college student, quiet and polite, the kind of girl who never missed curfew, never raised her voice, and always came home before dark. She left the house with a small smile. Her mother reminded her, like always, come back soon. But Mansi never came back. When the sun went down, the worry began. At first, it was subtle, just a glance at the clock, a quick phone call. Then came the repeated dials, the anxious pacing, the helpless wait. Her phone rang for hours, then suddenly went dead. By midnight, panic had set in. The next morning, her family went to the police station, hoping it was all just a misunderstanding. But the officers responded with the same old assumption. She must have eloped. Girls her age do this all the time. But Mansi wasn't that girl. Her clothes, her ID, her books, everything was still in her room. Her behavior leading up to that day? Normal. No signs of a plan. No secret messages. No suspicious activity. And then there was Manikant Pandey, her mother's brother. An uncle. A protector. Or so everyone thought. He'd been strangely evasive since her disappearance. Present, but not involved. Nervous, yet not grieving. He offered no theories, no help, no urgency. Just the same dead-eyed response. She ran away. But when police began pulling cell tower data, surveillance footage, and local testimonies, a different picture began to form. The last person to see Mansi alive? Manikant. And in the shadows of that discovery lay something far worse than anyone had imagined. A secret relationship, a betrayal masked as love, and a plan to ensure she would never speak again. The town whispered about a missing girl. But what they didn't know was that the truth wasn't buried far away. It was waiting just under their feet. As investigators dug deeper into Mansi's life, they weren't expecting to uncover anything so disturbing. She was just a teenager, a college girl. No enemies. No drama. But behind her soft voice and obedient demeanor was a story no one wanted to believe. Mansi had been in a relationship with her own uncle, Manikant Pandey. Yes, that uncle. Her mother's younger brother. The one who used to bring her sweets when she was little. The one who took her to school on his bike. The one everyone trusted. The affair had gone on for nearly 2 years, carefully hidden beneath the surface of family gatherings, weddings, and temple visits. It started when Mansi was just 17. At first, maybe it felt like attention, affection disguised as protection. But over time, it turned into something much darker. Something that had no name. Something she didn't know how to stop. A few family members knew. Maybe they turned a blind eye. Maybe they didn't understand. Or maybe they were just too scared of what it meant. Because in small towns like theirs, honor mattered more than truth. More than safety. More than love. But Mansi was changing. As she stepped into adulthood, she began pulling away from the relationship. She made new friends. Her confidence grew. She spoke often of a boy at college, someone her age, someone she liked, someone she might even want to marry. For Manikant, that was unacceptable. He was no longer the center of her world. His hold over her was slipping, and with it, his sense of power. What they had, what he forced into being, was not love. It was control, and he was losing it. Those who knew Manikant described him as calm, soft-spoken, respectful. But beneath that mask, something possessive, obsessive, was stirring. As Mansi's independence grew, so did his fear. Fear that she might expose the truth. Fear that she might marry someone else. Fear that she might finally escape. And when a man like Manikant loses control, he doesn't beg. He destroys. What begins in silence often ends in screams. By early 2022, Mansi was ready to move on. She had dreams, college, a job, maybe a future in the city. And yes, there was someone new. A boy her age. Kind. Gentle. Someone who made her laugh. She wanted normal. She wanted peace. But Manikant Pandey couldn't handle it. The man who once called her princess began flooding her phone with dark, obsessive messages. At first, it was guilt, then threats, then full-blown emotional blackmail. "If you leave me, I'll kill myself," one message read. "After everything I gave you, this is how you repay me?" He wasn't just heartbroken. He was entitled. To him, Monsi wasn't a niece. She wasn't even a person. She was a possession, something he had taken, claimed, and now refused to lose. He began showing up near her college, watching from a distance, calling from unknown numbers, asking mutual relatives to talk sense into her. One day, he even approached her near a temple and begged her not to abandon him. But Monsi stood firm. She was no longer afraid. She told him clearly, "I don't love you. I never did. I want to live my life. Please leave me alone." But with each boundary she set, Pandy's desperation deepened. He would go days without eating, then call her crying at midnight. He told her he'd hurt himself, that he had no reason to live, that her happiness was killing him. It wasn't love anymore, if it ever had been. It was a trap, and she was clawing her way out. And then came the final straw. Monsi told him she had chosen someone else. A boy her family would approve of. A boy she wanted to marry. And just like that, Pandy broke. All the softness drained from his eyes. All the talk of suicide turned outward. If he couldn't have her, no one could. It was just after noon on a quiet summer day in July 2022 when Monsi stepped out of her house, telling her mother she was meeting a friend. She carried her phone, a small purse, and a look of quiet resolve. She had made a decision. She was going to put the past behind her, for good. But Manikant Pandy wasn't just waiting for a conversation. He had already decided how this day would end. The meeting spot was familiar, an isolated lane near the edge of town where no one would notice two people talking, or arguing, or worse. To Monsi, it was one last attempt to give closure, to explain things, to say goodbye. To Pandy, it was the final performance. Eyewitnesses later recalled seeing them together, their voices raised, their expressions tense. Monsi stood her ground, insisting it was over. She was calm, collected. But Pandy, his body language was coiled, tight. His eyes held a storm that no one else could read. Words were exchanged, bitter ones. He pleaded. She refused. He threatened. She turned to leave. And that's when it happened. In a blind, furious moment, Pandy lunged. His hands wrapped around her neck. The same hands that had once gifted her bangles and sweets, that had once written love letters, now tightened in rage. She struggled, clawed, gasped. But he didn't stop. It took less than a minute to end her life. Less than a minute to silence her forever. When it was done, Pandy stood over her lifeless body, panting, trembling. The reality of what he had done slowly set in, but not as regret. No, it was control. Final, permanent control. He had taken back what he believed was his. Instead of calling the police, instead of turning himself in, he chose deception. He picked up her phone and smashed it. He dumped it far away, hoping it would look like she had eloped. Maybe no one would suspect him. Maybe in time this would fade away. But the truth, like a buried body, never stays hidden forever. If you're still with us, hit subscribe, because what comes next is the unraveling of lies and a killer's calm descent into exposure. After the murder, Manikant Pandy didn't panic. Not outwardly. He didn't cry, didn't run. Instead, he slipped back into his carefully worn mask, the doting uncle, the helpful relative, the innocent bystander. His first move was cold and calculated. He took Monsi's phone, the device that held months of messages, call logs, and digital footprints, and hurled it into the swift current of the nearby Ganges River. If her location couldn't be tracked, if her chats disappeared, maybe the story he was about to tell would hold. Then he crafted his lie. Monsi had eloped. He told her parents that she had grown distant in recent weeks, that she had been talking to someone they didn't know. Maybe it was a classmate. Maybe she had left willingly. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't something to worry about. The tragedy was some believed him, at least for a while. Monsi was 19. Young. Private. It wasn't unheard of for girls her age to leave home for love. The initial police report even listed her as a missing person, suspected elopement. But as the hours turned to days and her friends came forward, the story began to crumble. Monsi hadn't told anyone about a boyfriend. Her social media activity stopped the day she vanished. Her best friend said she was planning to focus on college and that she wasn't seeing anyone seriously. Most telling of all, the CCTV footage from a nearby lane, blurry but enough to raise eyebrows, showed her walking with someone that looked very much like Pandy. Investigators began to dig, and they dug deep. Call records revealed late-night communications between Monsi and her uncle. Message timestamps, although the contents were lost, painted a timeline. And digital forensic teams noticed something strange. A sudden disappearance of Monsi's online presence, right after a ping from an area close to Pandy's workplace. The police no longer believed in elopement. They believed in premeditation. As suspicion tightened around him like a noose, Pandy remained disturbingly calm. He didn't run. He didn't confess. He just waited, as though he still believed he could outsmart the truth. But the truth was already chasing him. For a while, Manikant Pandy held it together. He answered questions calmly. He stuck to his version that Monsi had run away and he had no idea where she went. But truth, like water, has a way of seeping through cracks. Investigators weren't buying it. They knew when someone was too calm, too rehearsed. So they turned to the one witness that never lies: data. First came the CCTV footage. Grainy, but clear enough to raise alarms. It showed Monsi walking near the canal road, not alone, but with a man in a dark shirt and cap. The timestamp matched her last known phone activity. When police enhanced the image and compared it with known pictures, there was no doubt. The man was Pandy. Next, WhatsApp metadata filled in the blanks. While Pandy had tried to delete messages, forensic teams traced call logs between his phone and Monsi's. Dozens of calls in the days leading up to her disappearance. One, just an hour before she vanished, lasted 27 minutes. But the most damning piece came from a local shopkeeper. He told police he'd seen them together on the afternoon of her disappearance. They looked like they were arguing, he recalled. She seemed upset. He looked intense. With this, the net tightened. Under interrogation, Pandy's confidence began to fray. He stumbled on details, repeated himself, changed timelines. His so-called alibi, that he was at work, collapsed when call data placed him miles away at the time of Monsi's last phone signal. 3 days in, and something broke inside him. He slumped in the interrogation chair. His voice lowered. His eyes didn't meet anyone else's. She said she didn't love me anymore, he whispered. She said she was going to marry someone else. I couldn't take it. There it was, the confession. Manikant Pandy admitted to luring his niece out under the pretense of a final conversation. He said they fought. She shouted at him, said it was over for good. And in that moment, rage took over. I didn't mean to, he said, but I couldn't let her go. But he did mean to. Every piece of evidence said so. In that room, with detectives watching silently, the mask of the grieving uncle finally slipped, and a murderer sat in its place. The news spread like wildfire. By the next morning, Monsi's face was on every local news channel. A bright, smiling college student, now a murder victim. And the man who had taken her life? Her own maternal uncle. People in Monsi's town couldn't believe it. To them, Manikant Pandy was quiet, respectable, a man who kept to himself. No one could imagine he had been in a secret relationship with his teenage niece. No one could imagine he was capable of killing her in cold blood. But now, the truth was everywhere. Neighbors gathered in small knots outside homes, whispering in disbelief. College students, Monsi's classmates, held a candlelight vigil. Some wept openly. Others stood in stunned silence. She wanted to be a teacher, one classmate said. She always talked about helping young girls stay in school. She was kind, so kind. But with the grief came anger. Women's rights groups descended on the town, demanding answers. Why hadn't anyone noticed the signs? Why had it taken days for the police to treat her disappearance as a possible crime? Why had Mansi been allowed to suffer in silence? Protests erupted, not just for Mansi, but for the countless girls whose voices go unheard. Posters read, "Justice for Mansi, Stop Family Abuse, End Honor-Based Violence." Behind closed doors, families began asking hard questions. Have we been turning a blind eye? Do we teach our daughters to be quiet while giving our sons too much freedom? Are we protecting traditions or protecting abusers? Meanwhile, Mansi's parents were inconsolable. Her mother, Manikant's own sister, refused to attend his first court hearing. "He wasn't just my brother," she said through tears. He was her murderer. In court, Manikant stood with his head down, flanked by police officers. The courtroom was packed, journalists, activists, students, and locals all watching him. He offered no apology, no remorse. Outside, chants rose from the crowd. No more silence. No more shame. Justice for Mansi. A town that once thought itself peaceful now faced an uncomfortable truth. The danger hadn't come from the outside. It had come from within. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read. Manikant Pandey, uncle, abuser, murderer, was found guilty of murder and destruction of evidence. He didn't flinch as the judge read the sentence. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was nothing at all. But outside those courtroom walls, the world had changed. Mansi's name became a symbol of trust betrayed, of innocence stolen, of how abuse can live quietly inside a family and still go unnoticed. Her story hit a nerve across India. News panels debated it, student groups protested, and families began having conversations they had long avoided. This wasn't just about one girl, said a social worker in Uttar Pradesh. This was about a culture that refuses to believe abuse can wear a familiar face. Mansi's college set up a memorial scholarship in her name. A mural of her smiling face now adorns a wall near her old classroom. Beneath it the words, "Speak, even if your voice shakes." In smaller towns and cities, the ripple effects were real. Schools began offering workshops on consent and healthy boundaries. Hotlines saw a rise in anonymous tips about abuse within homes. Young girls, once taught to stay silent, began speaking up. But still, for Mansi's family, the loss was unbearable. Her mother never returned to the home where she raised her daughter. Her father refused all interviews. And when asked what justice looked like, her younger brother simply said, "Justice would be having my sister back." The case of Manikant Pandey and Mansi wasn't just about a crime. It was a mirror held up to society. A reminder that monsters don't always come from outside. Sometimes they grow quietly in places we call home. If you've made it this far, thank you for witnessing Mansi's story. Her voice was silenced, but her truth echoes still. If you believe stories like hers need to be told, subscribe, share, and speak up. More than anything, listen, especially to those who are afraid to speak. Because sometimes listening is the first step to saving a life.